My name is Magnus Reynolds, 68 years old, and I built my Mediterranean villa with these hands after 40 years in construction. It was supposed to be my retirement sanctuary. Then my only daughter Amanda looked me in the eyes and said, "This is theirs now, you are not allowed to come," as she gave my beloved home to her husband's family. I just smiled and nodded, but inside I was already planning. They had no idea what was coming. Where are you watching from today? If you believe in standing up for yourself when family betrays you, hit that subscribe button and join me as I share how I prepared a surprise they would never forget. I was born in Boston to working-class parents who taught me the value of honest labor. By 18, I was already working construction, learning every aspect of the trade from foundation to finishing. I was naturally good with my hands and had an eye for quality. When other guys were cutting corners, I was the one insisting on doing things right even if it took longer. That attention to detail paid off. By 30, I had my own contracting business, specializing in custom homes for clients who appreciated craftsmanship. That's where I met Catherine, my late wife. She was an interior designer, working on one of my projects, and we butted heads at first. She thought my timeline was too conservative. I thought her design would be impossible to execute within budget. We both turned out to be right, and somewhere between our professional arguments we fell in love. Catherine was everything. I wasn't creative, spontaneous, always seeing possibilities where I saw practical limitations. We got married in 1982, bought a modest starter home, and focused on building our businesses. Amanda came along in 1985, and she was the perfect blend of both of us, my determination and Catherine's imagination. We were the picture of a happy family for many years, until Catherine was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer when Amanda was 12. We fought it with everything we had, but we lost her just 14 months later. Just like that, it was just Amanda and me, trying to figure out how to be a family without the person who had been our emotional center. Raising a teenage daughter as a single father wasn't easy. There were arguments about curfews, tears over boys who broke her heart, and countless moments where I desperately wished Catherine was there to help navigate the choppy waters of adolescence. But we made it work. I learned to braid hair and talk about periods. I sat through countless dance recitals and helped with science projects. I made sure she knew she was loved, even when I was exhausted from running my business. Over the years, my company grew successful enough that I could pick and choose my projects. When Amanda went off to college, I started my masterpiece, a Mediterranean villa overlooking the Pacific in Northern California. It took 4 years to build, with every detail personally overseen. I handcrafted the staircase banister from walnut, installed Italian marble in the entryway, and designed the courtyard garden with Catherine's favorite roses. The 3-bedroom main house had soaring ceilings and ocean views, while the detached guest house provided privacy for visitors. This wasn't just any house. It was my legacy, the culmination of everything I'd learned in my career. Every nail, every joint, every paint stroke represented my life's work. I designed it to be beautiful but practical, luxurious but durable, impressive but comfortable. Most importantly, I built it to be a family home where Amanda and her future family could gather for holidays, where grandchildren could one day run through the gardens Catherine would have loved. While I was building the house, Amanda and I maintained a close relationship despite the distance. After losing Catherine, we developed our own traditions. Sunday morning, pancakes became sacred, even when she was home from college. We took hiking trips together at least once a year. When she graduated with honors from her Ivy League university, fully paid for by me, I was the proudest father in the audience. I supported her early career in marketing, offering advice when asked, but giving her space to make her own way. We had weekly dinners whenever possible, and she would often call me for advice on everything from career moves to apartment leases. During holidays, she would always come home, and we would honor Catherine's memory by maintaining her traditions: Christmas Eve fondue, New Year's Day hike, birthday celebrations with chocolate raspberry cake. I taught Amanda the values of hard work, integrity, and family loyalty. Or at least I thought I did. Everything changed when she met Jackson Grant at a friend's dinner party. She brought him to meet me just 2 weeks later, clearly smitten. On the surface, Jackson was charming, polite, and attentive. He worked in finance, something about investment portfolios and client management that sounded impressive but vague. He complimented my home effusively, asked about my construction business with apparent interest, and treated Amanda with affection. But something felt off. Maybe it was the way his smile never quite reached his eyes, or how he subtly guided all conversations back to displays of wealth and status. When Amanda wasn't looking, his gaze would wander around my home, assessing it like he was taking inventory. I noticed how he would name-drop wealthy clients and expensive restaurants, always positioning himself as someone accustomed to luxury. These were red flags, but I dismissed them as my own overprotectiveness. Amanda was 32, successful in her own right. I trusted her judgment. 7 months later, they were engaged. It seemed rushed to me, but Amanda was glowing with happiness. "When you know," she told me, echoing what her mother had said about me all those years ago. So I supported them publicly, while privately harboring concerns. When Amanda asked if I would pay for the wedding, I agreed without hesitation. The celebration cost over $100,000, with everything from top-shelf champagne to a designer dress. As a wedding gift, I gave them $75,000 toward their future money I had set aside for Amanda since she was a child. I wanted to believe I was gaining a son, not losing a daughter. How wrong I was. The changes in Amanda were subtle at first. She missed our weekly dinners more often, always with plausible excuses. Work commitments, social obligations with Jackson's colleagues, minor illnesses. When we did meet, she was distracted, constantly checking her phone or steering conversations toward their social calendar. "You wouldn't believe who we had dinner with last night" became her favorite opening line, followed by names of local celebrities or business figures I was supposed to recognize. Her appearance changed too. Gone were the practical quality clothes she'd always favored, replaced by designer labels she made sure I noticed. Her previously natural makeup became elaborate. Her casual confidence transformed into something more calculated. Even her speech patterns shifted, adopting Jackson's habit of dropping casual references to luxury brands and exclusive locations. Most concerning was her newfound dismissiveness toward me and the values I'd raised her with. When I mentioned taking on a small project for an old client as a favor, she scoffed. "Dad, you're retired now. You don't need to be working with your hands anymore." It's a little old-fashioned. The way she said it made me feel like she was embarrassed by my trade, the very work that had provided her privileged upbringing. The Christmas after their wedding made the transformation clear. They arrived 3 hours late to our traditional dinner, offering no real apology. Amanda spent most of the evening showing off her new jewelry and discussing their upcoming ski trip to Aspen, while Jackson monopolized conversations with stories about his business connections. When I tried to maintain our tradition of sharing memories of Catherine, Amanda quickly changed the subject. "Let's focus on the present, Dad," she said, with a dismissive wave that broke my heart. Our relationship had become transactional. She called when they needed something: advice on investment properties, recommendations for contractors, references to my business connections. Our conversations no longer included personal sharing or reminiscing. I was worried but tried to adapt, telling myself this was just a phase of newlywed adjustment. I made excuses for her behavior, hoping time would bring back the daughter I knew. Meeting Jackson's family explained a lot. The Grants presented themselves as old money, but something about them rang false. Harold and Diane Grant, Jackson's parents, had a history of failed businesses and several lawsuits I discovered through a casual internet search. His sister Morgan and brother Taylor carried themselves with entitlement, despite having no apparent careers beyond consulting for their father's newest venture. From the first family gathering, they treated me with thinly veiled condescension. "It's so impressive what you've accomplished coming from your background," Diane said, as if being a self-made businessman was a curious anthropological phenomenon. They asked pointed questions about my property, the value of my business, and whether I had diversified investments. During these conversations, Amanda remained silent, allowing their subtle digs without defense. Their interest in my villa was particularly noticeable. Harold would wander through rooms, commenting on structural features and potential improvements. Taylor once asked outright what I thought the property was worth in the current market. Morgan photographed several rooms during a visit, claiming she was getting ideas for her own place. More disturbing were the comments I overheard when they thought I wasn't listening. "Family resources should be shared," Harold said during one visit while examining my custom-built entertainment center, "especially with those who know how to maximize their potential." "Just wait," Jackson had replied. Everything in due time. Their influence over Amanda grew with each interaction. She began echoing their opinions on everything from politics to home decor. When I expressed concern about a particularly risky investment Jackson was considering, she accused me of not trusting them. The Grants understand money in a way you don't, Dad, she said, as if my decades of successful business management counted for nothing. Then came the financial warning signs. First, it was small loans, $5,000 for a business opportunity that couldn't wait, $10,000 for unexpected medical expenses. I gave without hesitation, though I noticed they still took luxury vacations shortly after these urgent needs. When I gently asked about repayment after several months, Amanda looked offended. We're family, Dad. Why are you keeping score? Jackson's mysterious business ventures repeatedly failed, always due to circumstances beyond his control, market fluctuations, unreliable partners, timing issues. Yet their lifestyle never diminished. They purchased a luxury condo, high-end vehicles, and designer wardrobes, while claiming financial struggles. When they visited my home, they arrived in a brand new European sports car, the same week they asked to delay repaying a loan. The truth became clear, accidentally. Amanda left her purse at my house after a brief visit, and when I called to let her know, she asked me to check if her credit card was inside, as she needed the number for an online purchase. Opening her wallet, I found not just one card, but 6, all showing maximum credit limits. A statement from one showed a balance over $30,000 with minimum payments barely covering the interest. When I returned her purse, I carefully mentioned my concern. I noticed you have quite a few credit cards. I hope you and Jackson aren't overextended. Their reaction was immediate defensiveness. That's none of your business, Jackson snapped, while Amanda accused me of snooping. They explained away the debt with vague references to business expenses and temporary cash flow issues. When I offered to help them create a budget or speak with a financial advisor, Jackson called me controlling, and Amanda agreed. We're adults, Dad. We don't need you managing our money. I backed off, but my worry deepened. The daughter who had once been sensible with money was now diving into debt while maintaining appearances. I didn't yet realize this was just the beginning. The call came late on a Tuesday night in March. Amanda was crying, barely coherent. There's been a major water leak in our condo. Everything's ruined. The management company says it'll take months to repair, and our insurance is giving us problems. We have nowhere to go. Without hesitation, I offered my home. The villa has plenty of space. You can stay as long as you need. I was secretly pleased at the chance to have Amanda close again, hoping this crisis might help repair our strained relationship. They arrived the next day with 4 suitcases and vague explanations about the extent of the damage. I showed them to the master bedroom, insisting they take it while I moved to the second bedroom. No, Dad, Amanda protested, though not very convincingly. We couldn't put you out of your room. It's just temporary, I assured them. Make yourselves comfortable. 2 weeks stretched into a month. When I gently asked about their progress with insurance or repairs, they provided elaborate stories about adjuster delays and contractor backlogs. These things take time, Jackson explained condescendingly, as if I hadn't dealt with construction issues my entire career. I offered to call industry contacts who could expedite repairs, but they quickly declined. After 6 weeks, I suggested they might be more comfortable in the guest house, giving us all more privacy. Actually, Amanda said, exchanging glances with Jackson, we were thinking you might prefer the guest house. It would give you more peace and quiet while we deal with all our calls to insurance and contractors. Surprised but accommodating, I agreed to the arrangement, moving my essential items to the smaller space. It was practical in some ways. The guest house had its own entrance and kitchen, allowing me independence. What I didn't realize was that this was the first step in pushing me out of my own home. The changes began slowly. Returning from a grocery run one day, I noticed my family photos had been removed from the living room walls, replaced by abstract artwork I'd never seen. When I asked about the photos, Amanda explained they'd been carefully stored in the attic. We needed to clear some space for our video calls with the insurance company. Don't worry, everything's safe. Next, my furniture began disappearing. My comfortable old leather recliner, custom made to my proportions, vanished from the den, replaced by a sleek modern chair that hurt my back. The dining table where Catherine and I had shared countless meals was suddenly in the garage, substituted with a glass monstrosity that Jackson had always wanted. Room by room, my house transformed. The warm Mediterranean colors I'd chosen with Catherine in mind were painted over with stark whites and grays. The kitchen was updated with appliances I didn't know how to operate. The garden, especially painful, was completely redesigned with Catherine's beloved rose garden removed to make way for a modern, entertaining space with a built-in bar. Each time I raised concerns, they had ready explanations. "We didn't think you were that attached to it. It's just temporary until we return to our place. We needed to make video calls to show the insurance company our living situation." The excuses were plausible individually, but disturbing as a pattern. Most alarming was the day I came into the main house and found Amanda going through my home office. She jumped when I entered quickly, closing a drawer. "Just looking for stamps," she said, though I could see my financial documents had been disturbed. That night, I discreetly checked my home safe behind the painting in my office and found it had been tampered with, though nothing immediately appeared missing. Increasingly, I felt unwelcome in my own home. Amanda started asking me to call first before coming over from the guest house. Jackson's on important work calls all day, and interruptions are really difficult for him. When I did visit, they would act inconvenienced, checking watches and making excuses to cut our time short. I found myself tiptoeing around my own property, planning my kitchen visits for times when they were likely to be out. I started taking meals back to the guest house rather than enduring uncomfortable silences at what had once been my dining table. The painful reality was settling in. I was being systematically removed from my own home, and my daughter was the one doing it. My growing discomfort prompted me to start documenting changes, taking discrete photos on my phone, and making notes of removed or altered items. I wasn't sure why I felt the need to do this, but some protective instinct was kicking in. I also began checking my important documents more regularly, making copies of financial records, property deeds, and my will. I called my old friend Thomas, a retired attorney, to casually discuss the situation over coffee in town. His expression grew serious as I relayed the events of the past few months. "Magnus, I don't want to alarm you, but this sounds concerning," he said, keeping his voice low. "Have you checked that your property documents are secure? Your banking information? Your will?" His question sent a chill through me. "You think they're after my money, my house? This is my daughter we're talking about." Thomas looked at me with sad eyes. "I've seen this before, not just as an attorney, but in my own extended family. People change, especially when they're influenced by others. Just be careful. Document everything." That evening, I made an excuse to check my home safe again, waiting until Amanda and Jackson left for dinner with his parents. With growing dread, I realized several things were indeed missing: my original property deed, a spare checkbook, and the backup keys to my safety deposit box. I was still processing this discovery when I heard them return earlier than expected, bringing several other people with them. Quickly locking the safe and replacing the painting, I emerged from the office to find Jackson's entire family making themselves at home in my living room. No one had called to tell me they were coming. No one had asked permission to bring guests. They were drinking my rare whiskey and lounging on new furniture I'd never purchased. "Dad," Amanda said with obvious surprise. "I thought you were spending the evening in the guest house." "I needed to check something in my office," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I didn't realize we were having company tonight." "Just a small family gathering," Jackson said smoothly. "Nothing formal. You're welcome to join us if you want." The way he said it, the implication that I needed permission to join them in my own home, made something shift inside me. I smiled tightly and declined returning to the guest house with my mind racing. That night, I barely slept, the reality of my situation becoming clearer by the hour. My home was being stolen from me piece by piece, and it seemed my own daughter was behind it. 2 weeks later, Amanda called to invite me to a special family dinner at the villa. Her voice had an artificial brightness that immediately put me on guard. "Everyone will be there," she said. "Jackson's parents, his siblings. We have something important to discuss." I arrived to find the dining room transformed. My handcrafted table had been returned from the garage but was now extended to seat 12 with elaborate place settings and floral arrangements. The Grants were already there, dressed formally and drinking champagne. Harold clapped me on the shoulder with forced joviality. "The man of the hour," he exclaimed, though I had no idea what he meant by that. Dinner was a strange affair. I was seated at the far end of my own table opposite Harold. who took the head position as if it were his rightful place. The conversation flowed around me, largely focused on renovation plans and property values in the area. Whenever I tried to contribute, someone would talk over me or change the subject. After dessert, Amanda stood and clinked her glass. "We have an announcement to make," she said, looking around the table but avoiding my eyes. "As you all know, Dad has been generous enough to let us stay here while our condo situation gets sorted out. But we've come to a more permanent arrangement that we're excited to share." My stomach tightened as she continued. "Dad and I have discussed his future needs at length," she said, though we had done no such thing. "At his age, this property is simply too much for him to maintain. All those stairs, the large gardens. It's becoming a burden rather than a joy." I opened my mouth to protest, but Jackson's mother reached over and patted my hand condescendingly, as if to comfort me for a decision I hadn't made. "So," Amanda continued, "we've agreed to a new family arrangement. Dad is transitioning ownership of the villa to us, and in turn will ensure he's taken care of in a more appropriate living situation." Harold raised his glass in a toast. "To family, taking care of family," he said, while the others murmured approval. I found my voice at last. "I'm sorry, but what exactly are you talking about? I haven't agreed to any property transfer." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Amanda and Jackson exchanged glances. "Dad," Amanda said slowly, as if speaking to a child, "we discussed this. You agreed it was for the best. The paperwork has already been filed." "What paperwork?" I demanded, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. Jackson's father jumped in. "Magnus, there's no need to be embarrassed about memory lapses at your age. It's perfectly normal. The important thing is that you're being taken care of. We're thinking of redoing the entire west wing," Jackson's sister added, completely ignoring the tension. "Those bedrooms get such lovely afternoon light." I stood up my chair, scraping loudly against the floor. "I have never discussed selling or giving away my home. I did not sign any paperwork. This is my house built with my own hands, and I have no intention of transitioning ownership to anyone." The room went silent again. Then Amanda stood, her face hardening in a way I'd never seen before. "Actually, Dad, it's already done. This is theirs now. You are not allowed to come back to the main house after tonight." I stared at my daughter, unable to reconcile this cold stranger with the child I had raised. "What are you saying?" Jackson walked over and placed a set of keys in my hand. "We found a nice senior apartment for you in town. 1 bedroom, very manageable. The first 6 months' rent is paid. You can move in tomorrow." I looked down at the unfamiliar keys, then back at the faces around the table. Smug, expectant, not a shred of shame among them. Only Amanda had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable, though not enough to retract her words. With as much dignity as I could muster, I placed the keys back on the table. "I'll be in the guest house tonight. We'll discuss this when you're ready to tell me the truth." As I walked out, I heard Harold say, "Well, that went about as expected. He'll come around once he realizes it's a done deal." Alone in the guest house, the full weight of betrayal crashed over me. It wasn't just about a house, though. The villa represented my life's work. It was the complete dismissal of my autonomy, the assumption that I could be cast aside when convenient, the weaponization of my age against me. And worst of all, it was being orchestrated by my own daughter. I sat in the darkness, memories washing over me. Catherine and I planning this house together before her illness. The 4 years of careful construction, every detail considered. Amanda, as a teenager, helping me select the Mediterranean tiles for the kitchen. The first Christmas in the completed villa, when Amanda said it felt like her mother was somehow present in the details we'd created together. Now she was giving it all away to people who saw it as nothing more than a status symbol and an asset to exploit. Physical pain accompanied the emotional devastation, my chest tight, my hands shaking. I found myself gasping for breath at one point, wondering if grief could actually cause a heart attack. Somehow, I made it through that terrible night, watching the sunrise from the guest house patio with a strange clarity emerging through the pain. I would not be a victim. Not of my daughter's betrayal, not of the Grant's manipulation. I had built my life once from nothing. I could stand up for myself now. Later that morning, after Amanda and Jackson left for appointments, I entered the main house using my key. In the office, I confirmed my worst fears. The safe had been completely emptied. Family photos had been removed from albums. Catherine's jewelry, which I'd saved for Amanda, was gone from the drawer where I kept it. Most disturbing was what I found in the trash. Fragments of family photos, torn documents, and a half-burned journal that Catherine had kept during her illness. These weren't items of financial value, just sentimental treasures deliberately destroyed. With growing certainty about what I needed to do, I drove to my bank. The manager's face told me everything before she spoke. "Mr. Reynolds, I'm glad you've come in. There have been some unusual activities on your accounts that our fraud department flagged. Several large transfers were attempted using your online banking credentials. We blocked them pending verification, which is what I've been trying to reach you about." "I didn't authorize any transfers," I said quietly. She nodded grimly. "That's what we suspected. You'll need to file a police report, and we'll need to close these accounts and open new ones immediately." From the bank, I went directly to Thomas's house. My old friend listened without interruption as I relayed everything, including the dinner announcement and the claimed property transfer. "They've committed multiple crimes," he said when I finished. "Identity theft, attempted fraud, and from what you've described, elder abuse, which is taken very seriously in California. As for the property, there's no legal way they could transfer the deed without your legitimate signature verified by a notary." "But they said the paperwork was already filed," I said. Thomas's expression darkened. "Then they've committed forgery as well. Magnus, this isn't just family dysfunction anymore. These are serious criminal matters." "She's still my daughter," I said, feeling the conflict tear at me. "And you raised her better than this," Thomas replied firmly. "The best thing you can do for Amanda is to show her that actions have consequences. Otherwise, she and Jackson will continue down this path until they end up in prison for something even worse." I knew he was right, but the decision wasn't easy. This wasn't how I imagined my retirement years. Filing police reports against my only child, consulting attorneys about property fraud. Yet as painful as it was, I could see only one path forward that maintained my dignity and upheld the values I'd always lived by. "What do I do first?" I asked Thomas. "First, we document everything. Then we fight back. And I know exactly who can help us." Thomas arranged for me to stay at his fishing cabin by the lake while we planned our next steps. The small rustic space was a far cry from my Mediterranean villa, but it offered something more valuable than luxury: safety and clarity. Away from the daily trauma of watching my home being dismantled, I could think more objectively about what needed to be done. The first few days were the hardest. I'd wake up disoriented momentarily, forgetting what had happened, then the reality would crash back like a physical blow. How had my only child become capable of such betrayal? Had I failed as a father without realizing it? The questions circled endlessly, threatening to pull me into despair. Thomas checked on me daily, bringing groceries and updates. Friends from my contracting days started dropping by when they heard I was staying at the cabin instead of my home. At first, I gave vague explanations about renovations, but as the visits continued, I found myself sharing small pieces of the truth. "Something's not right with Amanda and her husband," I admitted to Joe, my former foreman. "They're making financial decisions I never approved." Joe's reaction surprised me. "Always thought that son-in-law was a snake oil salesman," he said bluntly. "The way he looked down his nose at your work when you introduced him at the retirement party. Like building things with your hands was beneath him while he shuffles paper and calls it finance." Gradually, I opened up to my closest friends, sharing the full story. Their outrage and support strengthened my resolve. These were people who had known me for decades, who had attended Catherine's funeral, who had watched Amanda grow up. Their perspective helped me see that the problem wasn't my failure as a father, but rather the toxic influence Jackson and his family had gained over Amanda. In quiet moments by the lake, I reflected on Catherine and what she would advise. She had always been my moral compass, practical but compassionate. "This isn't about revenge," I could almost hear her say. "It's about principle, about standing up for what's right." The mental conversations with her memory helped solidify my decision. This wasn't just about a house or money. It was about not allowing myself to be discarded and defrauded by the people who should have honored me most. With my mind clear, I met with Sarah Peterson, an attorney specializing in elder law, whom Thomas had recommended. She listened intently to my story, taking detailed notes and asking precise questions about timelines and documents. "This is unfortunately more common than you might think," she said, "though usually not quite so brazen. Let's start by checking the county records. to see what, if anything, has actually been filed regarding your property. Her assistant returned from the records office with troubling news. A deed transfer had indeed been filed with what appeared to be my signature. Sarah showed me the document, and even I could see it was a poor forgery. They didn't even try very hard, I said, pointing out discrepancies between the signature and my actual handwriting. Fortunately for us, that makes our job easier, Sarah replied. Now let's talk about the irrevocable trust you established 10 years ago. I had almost forgotten about the trust. After Catherine's death, I had worked with an estate attorney to place the villa and most of my assets in an irrevocable family trust, with specific provisions about how and when transfers could occur. It required multiple verified signatures, witness statements, and other safeguards, specifically designed to prevent unauthorized changes. This trust is bulletproof, Sarah said after reviewing the documents. There's no legal way they could transfer the property without going through the trust procedures, which clearly hasn't happened. What they've filed is not just forgery, it's a completely invalid document that wouldn't stand up to any legal scrutiny. Over the next week, we gathered evidence systematically. The bank provided records of the attempted unauthorized transfers. The household staff I occasionally employed gave statements about the gradual takeover of the property and the strange instructions they'd received from Jackson about not discussing changes with me. My documented timeline of removed possessions and altered spaces provided additional support. With Sarah's guidance, I filed a police report detailing the forgery, identity theft, and financial fraud. The detective assigned to the case took it seriously, especially after seeing the bank records and forged deed. Elder abuse is a priority crime in this jurisdiction, he assured me. We'll be investigating this thoroughly, including potential charges for everyone involved in the fraudulent activities. Meanwhile, Sarah prepared cease and desist orders and an emergency petition to the court affirming my ownership rights. Once these are served, they'll have 24 hours to vacate the premises or face immediate legal consequences, she explained. But timing is important. We want to make sure all our documentation is in order before we move. While the legal machinery was in motion, I focused on practical preparations. I hired a security company recommended by the police detective, explaining the situation and arranging for them to be present when the legal documents were served. I also worked with a locksmith to change all codes and keys once the property was secured. The most difficult preparation was emotional. Regardless of Amanda's actions, she was still my daughter. I struggled with the knowledge that our relationship might never recover from this confrontation. At Thomas's suggestion, I began seeing a therapist specializing in family estrangement. Dr. Lydia Harris helped me navigate the complex emotions, the grief, anger, guilt, and determination that warred within me. You can love your daughter while still holding her accountable, she reminded me. Setting boundaries doesn't mean you've stopped caring. She also connected me with a support group for parents estranged from adult children. Hearing others' stories helped me understand that I wasn't alone in this painful situation. Many had experienced manipulation and financial exploitation by children they had raised with love and sacrifice. Their journeys toward setting boundaries while maintaining their own dignity gave me strength. Physical activity became my daily medicine. Long walks around the lake, chopping wood for Thomas's fireplace, basic carpentry projects in his workshop. The routine of rising early, moving my body, and creating something tangible helped ground me during a time when everything else felt uncertain. Throughout this period, Amanda made several attempts to contact me. Her messages started with casual inquiries about when I would be collecting my remaining things from the guest house. When I didn't respond, her tone shifted to concern about my mental state and suggestions that I might need memory care assessment. The final messages became outright manipulative, with claims that she was only doing what we agreed upon and that my confusion was worrying everyone. I saved each message as evidence, but didn't respond. Sarah advised maintaining complete silence until all legal preparations were complete. After 3 weeks of methodical preparation, everything was ready. Through casual conversations with the housekeeper who still maintained the guest house, we learned that the Grants were planning a celebration the following weekend, a housewarming party to show off their new acquisition to their social circle. Moving trucks were scheduled to deliver new furniture and caterers had been booked. It's perfect timing, Sarah said when I called her with this information. They've essentially planned their own eviction party. The night before the confrontation, I could barely sleep. Not from fear or doubt, but from a strange sense of calm determination. I'd spent my life building things properly, following codes and specifications, ensuring solid foundations. Now I was about to demonstrate that principles and integrity were my personal foundation regardless of the cost. In the morning light, I stood on Thomas's dock, watching the sun rise over the lake. Whatever happened today would change my family forever, but I was ready. "Time to go," Magnus Thomas called from the cabin. Sarah just texted, "Everything's in place." I took one last deep breath of lake air and turned toward the waiting car. The surprise I had prepared was about to be delivered. I parked down the street from my villa, out of sight, but with a clear view of the driveway. By 10 in the morning, the activity was already in full swing. 2 moving trucks had arrived with workers unloading elaborate furniture and artwork. Catering vans delivered tables, chairs, and equipment for what appeared to be a substantial celebration. Jackson's shiny new SUV was parked prominently in the circular driveway, alongside his parents' luxury sedan and several other expensive vehicles. From my vantage point, I could see Amanda directing the setup on the front lawn, pointing to where tables should be placed and decorations hung. She was dressed immaculately, hair and makeup, perfect gesturing with the confidence of someone who believed they were completely in control. Jackson stood nearby, arm around his father's shoulders, pointing at the house, as if showing off features of his new acquisition. The entire Grant family had assembled for the occasion. Jackson's mother supervised the catering staff with imperious instructions. His sister arranged flowers while his brother set up a champagne station on the terrace. They moved through my property with the entitled ease of people who believed their ownership was absolute and uncontestable. Thomas sat beside me in the car, watching the scene unfold. "You ready for this?" he asked quietly. I nodded, feeling surprisingly steady. More ready than I've been for anything in a long time. At precisely 11:30 as planned, Sarah's black sedan pulled up in front of the house, followed by a police cruiser and an unmarked car containing the private security team we'd hired. I waited until they had positioned themselves before driving down to join them. The activity on the lawn stuttered to a halt as the procession of vehicles arrived. Amanda froze mid-gesture, her expression shifting from confusion to alarm as she recognized the police insignia. Jackson and his father stopped their animated conversation, turning toward the newcomers with obvious concern. I parked behind Sarah's car and stepped out, standing tall despite the ache in my heart. The look of shock on Amanda's face when she saw me would stay with me forever. A mixture of disbelief, anger, and something that might have been fear. "Dad," she called, quickly composing herself and walking toward me with a forced smile. "What's going on? We weren't expecting you today." "I think you know exactly what's going on, Amanda," I replied calmly. Sarah approached with her briefcase, the 2 uniformed officers flanking her. The security team positioned themselves discreetly by the entrance to the property. "Good morning, Sarah," said professionally. "I'm Sarah Peterson, attorney for Magnus Reynolds. I'm here to serve several legal documents and to oversee the execution of court orders obtained yesterday." Jackson rushed forward, his charm instantly replaced by aggression. "What the hell is this? You can't just barge in here with police. This is private property." "Yes, it is private property," Sarah agreed coolly. "The private property of Magnus Reynolds, as confirmed by this emergency court order affirming his exclusive ownership rights." She handed the document to Jackson, who snatched it angrily. While Jackson skimmed the papers with growing alarm, Sarah continued, "Additionally, I'm serving you with this cease and desist order regarding the fraudulent deed transfer filed with the county recorder's office 3 weeks ago." She passed another document to him. "And finally, these are copies of the police reports filed for identity theft, forgery, financial fraud, and elder abuse." The officers stepped forward. "Mr. and Mrs. Grant," one said formally, "we're here to ensure the peaceful execution of these court orders and to investigate the criminal complaints that have been filed." Harold Grant pushed his way into the circle, red-faced with indignation. "This is preposterous. We have documentation of a legal transfer. Magnus agreed to everything." Sarah calmly opened her briefcase and removed a folder. "You're referring to this document, I presume." She held up a copy of the forged deed transfer. "Our forensic document examiner has already confirmed this signature is a forgery." Furthermore, the property is held in an irrevocable trust that would make such a transfer impossible without multiple verified signatures and trustee approvals. She turned to the officers. "Detective, I believe you'll find this relevant to your investigation of the forgery charges." The detective nodded, accepting the document. "We'll be following up with all parties involved in creating and filing this fraudulent instrument." Amanda had been standing frozen during this exchange, but now she rushed to me, her eyes filling with tears. "Dad, there's been a terrible misunderstanding. We were only trying to help you. You've been so confused lately, forgetting conversations we've had." "Stop it, Amanda," I said quietly but firmly. "There was no misunderstanding. There were no forgotten conversations. You and Jackson attempted to steal my home through fraud and forgery after systematically removing me from it for months." "That's a serious accusation," Jackson's mother interjected, attempting to maintain her composure. "Magnus, perhaps at your age memory issues are—" "My memory is perfectly intact," I interrupted, "as are the bank records showing attempted unauthorized transfers from my accounts, and the security footage from my home office showing Jackson attempting to access my safe, and the statements from household staff about being instructed to restrict my access to the main house." The color drained from Jackson's face as I enumerated the evidence. His father stepped forward suddenly. "All business. Look, clearly there's been some confusion on all sides. I'm sure we can work this out privately as a family. There's no need for police involvement." "I'm afraid that's not possible," Sarah replied. "The court has already been presented with evidence of criminal activity, including elder abuse, which requires mandatory reporting and investigation in this state." Jackson turned on Amanda, his facade cracking completely. "You said this would be clean, that he'd go along with it once it was done. Now we're looking at criminal charges." "Don't you dare blame me," Amanda shot back. "This was your idea from the start. You said the trust wouldn't be an issue." Their mutual recriminations confirmed everything, removing any lingering doubt I might have had about their intentions. Sarah raised her voice over their argument. "According to the court order, all persons not legally residing at this property prior to the fraudulent filing must vacate the premises immediately, taking only personal belongings that can be verified as their property. You have 1 hour." "1 hour," Jackson's sister exclaimed. "That's impossible. We have guests coming at 2. "You'll need to cancel your event," I said simply. "This house is not yours to showcase." "You can't just throw us out on the street," Jackson protested. "We live here now. All our things are here." "Your legal residence is the condo you claim was damaged," Sarah pointed out. "As for your belongings, the court order allows removal of items you can prove you purchased. The security team will oversee that process to ensure no property belonging to Mr. Reynolds is removed." Amanda approached me again, this time with calculated vulnerability in her expression. "Dad, please, don't do this to us. To me. I'm your daughter, your only child. Mom would be heartbroken to see you treating me this way." It was the mention of Catherine that finally broke through my calm exterior. "Don't you dare use your mother in this. She raised you to be better than what you've become. She would be devastated by what you've done, not by my response to it." Amanda's face hardened instantly, the manipulation falling away. "Fine. Have your precious house. But don't expect me to take care of you when you're old and helpless. You've chosen a building over your own family." "No, Amanda," I replied sadly. "You chose greed and deception over family. I'm simply refusing to be your victim." The next hour passed in tense activity. The security team and officers supervised as Jackson and Amanda gathered clothing and personal items, while the catering and moving companies were turned away at the gate. Jackson's family stood in shocked disbelief as their celebration turned into a humiliating eviction. Harold made one last attempt as they prepared to leave. "You realize this will destroy any relationship with your daughter," he said, as if offering a final negotiation. "Is that really worth it for a house?" I looked at him steadily. This was never about the house. It was about honor, truth, and consequences, values your family might want to reconsider. With the grace of wounded dignity, I stood on my front steps as they loaded their cars with hastily packed suitcases. Amanda didn't look back as Jackson peeled out of the driveway, his parents following close behind. The security team would remain for 24 hours to ensure they didn't return, while the locksmith changed every lock and security code. As the last car disappeared from view, Sarah touched my arm gently. "You did the right thing, Magnus. It took tremendous courage." I nodded silently, taking the new keys from the locksmith. With a heavy heart but steady hand, I unlocked my front door and stepped back into my home. The silence in the villa that first night was both a relief and a burden. After months of feeling like an unwelcome guest in my own home, I could finally move freely through the rooms again. Yet the emptiness echoed with absence, not just of people but of the family I thought I had. The physical damage was extensive. Walls had been painted in cold, impersonal colors. Custom features I'd built with care had been removed or altered. Family photographs were missing from their frames. Catherine's grand piano, which I'd kept perfectly tuned since her death, had been relegated to the garage, water damage warping its once beautiful finish. Most painful was the garden. Catherine's roses had been completely removed, the special soil we'd prepared together scraped away and replaced with generic landscaping. The Japanese maple we'd planted on Amanda's 16th birthday was gone, a modernist sculpture standing in its place. In those first days, I moved through the house, methodically documenting damage for insurance and legal purposes, but also searching for anything that remained of our family history. In the back of Amanda's former closet, I found a box they had missed in their hasty departure. Filled with photo albums, Catherine's jewelry, and other family mementos they had hidden rather than displayed. These treasures became the foundation of reclaiming my space. The legal consequences unfolded gradually. The district attorney filed charges against Jackson for forgery, fraud, and financial elder abuse. Amanda was charged as an accessory, though with lesser counts due to my reluctant testimony about her secondary role. Jackson's parents faced conspiracy charges when evidence emerged of their explicit advice about how to circumvent the trust protections. I took no pleasure in these proceedings, attending court dates with a heavy heart. The media caught wind of the story. Successful contractor defrauded by daughter and son-in-law, bringing unwanted attention. I declined all interview requests, preferring to maintain whatever privacy remained possible. The hardest part was enforcing the restraining order. Amanda made several attempts to contact me, her messages swinging wildly between angry accusations and tearful pleas. When direct communication failed, she enlisted mutual friends to advocate on her behalf, forcing me to explain the situation repeatedly. Her desperation increased after Jackson's family turned against the young couple, blaming them for the failed scheme and cutting off financial support. "I know she's hurt you terribly," my friend Joe said after delivering one such message, "but she's still your daughter, maybe with some professional help." "The door isn't permanently closed," I explained. "But reconciliation requires genuine remorse and changed behavior, not just consequences catching up with her." I meant it. Despite everything, I left a path open for eventual healing. I wrote a single letter to Amanda, delivered through her attorney, explaining that I remained open to rebuilding our relationship if she was willing to acknowledge her actions, seek professional help, and make amends. The ball was in her court. My own healing journey began with restoring the villa. Rather than simply reverting to its former state, I approached it as a new project, honoring the past while creating something that reflected my current life. I rebuilt Catherine's rose garden, but added new varieties alongside her favorites. I restored the structural elements that had been damaged, but updated finishes and colors to feel fresh. The work became therapy, the physical labor helping process emotional pain. Some days I would find myself stopping mid-task, overcome by a wave of grief for the daughter I had lost. Not to death, but to choices that had transformed her into someone I no longer recognized. Those moments became less frequent as months passed, but never disappeared entirely. New relationships filled the void that Amanda's betrayal had created. I volunteered at a community woodworking center, teaching basic skills to teenagers and retirees alike. Through this work, I met Harold Jenkins, another widower, whose children lived overseas. We bonded over shared experiences and complementary skills, his expertise in metalwork blending well with my carpentry knowledge. Harold and I began meeting for weekly fishing trips, our conversations ranging from technical discussions of joint construction to philosophical debates about parenthood and legacy. His perspective on his distant but loving relationship with his children helped me contextualize my own situation. "You can love someone completely while still requiring basic respect," he told me during one such conversation. That's not conditional love, it's healthy boundaries. Inspired by what I had learned through my own experience, I helped establish a support group for seniors facing family estrangement or financial exploitation. What began as informal meetings at the community center grew into a recognized resource, eventually partnering with legal aid services to provide education and assistance to vulnerable elders. Through this work, I met others who had faced similar betrayals. Some had reconciled with estranged family members after establishing firm boundaries. Others had created new family connections among friends and community. All had found ways to move forward with dignity and purpose. As the one-year anniversary of the confrontation approached, I hosted a garden party in my restored villa. Friends old and new gathered to celebrate not just the renewed space, but the renewed spirit it represented. The roses were blooming again, their fragrance filling the air as we shared meals and stories on the terrace. Thomas raised a toast toward the end of the evening. To Magnus, who taught us all that standing up for yourself isn't about anger or revenge, it's about living with integrity regardless of the cost. Later, as the last guests departed, I walked through the garden alone, reflecting on the journey. The house around me was beautiful again, but in a different way than before, marked by experience, resilience, and deliberate choices rather than just aesthetic perfection. I had come to understand that parenthood doesn't guarantee a particular outcome. You can provide love, values, and opportunities, but ultimately your children make their own choices. Amanda's decisions had broken my heart, but they hadn't broken me. If anything, they had revealed strengths I hadn't known I possessed. The most valuable lesson was realizing that the home I built was never just about the structure, but about integrity, in construction and in life. Standing up for myself had brought an unexpected peace, a certainty about my own worth that no betrayal could diminish. The freedom that came from releasing expectations while maintaining boundaries had opened space for new relationships and purposes I might never have discovered otherwise. I still kept a small photo of Amanda on my desk, not the recent image of the stranger she had become, but a picture from her college graduation, when her smile still reached her eyes and her future seemed limitless. It remained a reminder that people can change in both directions, that the door to reconciliation stays unlocked even when firmly closed. As darkness fell, I sat on the bench beneath the new Japanese maple I had planted that spring. Its branches were still young and slender, but in time they would spread to provide shade for whoever sat here in future years. I had built this home to last beyond my lifetime, and despite everything, that purpose remained intact. What have you learned from watching someone you trusted completely betray you? Have you ever had to make the difficult choice between maintaining a relationship and maintaining your self-respect? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more reflections on life's unexpected challenges. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, sometimes the strongest foundations are the ones we rebuild after everything else has crumbled.